Okay, cool. Hi, guys. I just wanted to jump in here today. I've just come off a session with a client, and there's been a lot of conversation around lately around fear and self-criticism. And she was talking to me about fear and when this inner critic comes up, and the inner critic that criticizes and judges the crap out of ourselves and says we're not good enough, or who do you think you are, or you can't do that. And she was actually judging herself for having those thoughts. And I've noticed this a lot lately. I've seen some posts, and this happens a lot in the personal development world, or when we're learning and growing with ourselves, and we feel that there's this idea that we shouldn't have fear, or when we have this internal dialogue criticism that actually we feel like we've regressed and we're not making progress and we're feeling stuck. Now, here's the thing. This fear is an equal emotion as anything else, as any other emotion like happiness or joy. It's part of us. And it's also programmed into our biology because we need fear to keep us alive. It serves a purpose. And so fear is actually there to keep us safe. And by making our fear wrong, we actually stop our progress. And so one of the things that I've learned recently through my own journey is I've started doing ice bathing. And I had a big breakthrough last week, and I did ice bathing again the other day, and then I did it last night. And I think what came out of it, has come out of it from the last couple of sessions is, first of all, every time it's humbling, and every day is day one, and the fear actually comes up every time. And there was a guy in the group that I'm doing it with that was there, and he was like, I ice bath every day, and I still get the fear. It still comes up. And so it's very humbling for us to have that reminder and being humbled by this process that I was doing, to be reminded that we still have to do the same processes no matter where we are in the journey. We still have to do the same thing. We still have to breathe. We still have to deal with the gremlins. And so this idea that when I get to here, I will not have fear, or I'll be happy when, is an illusion, and it is a fantasy, and it actually sets itself up for failure. And so it's not about whether the fear is there or the fear is not there. It's actually changing our relationship with fear and the shadow, which is the part of us that doesn't feel worthy, doesn't feel, and this shadow part is often a younger part of us, a part of us from childhood, or from an event, or from a series of events, often childhood. Usually childhood is where it stems from. And they're all inside of us, and there's parts of us that need to be seen and heard. And the worst thing we can do is actually make our fear wrong. And the best thing we can do is acknowledge it and still be okay with it being there, and sit in the discomfort of it and still keep moving forward. And what we tend to do as human beings is we love comfort. And when anything gets uncomfortable, we will retract. Okay, we're wired that way because it's a safety mechanism. But what we've got to understand is, like, how do we what my client was asking me this morning was, how do I bypass this? How do I not feel like this? How do I not feel like shit? You don't. It's changing your relationship with the fear and the dynamic of it, and understanding that we have to learn to love all parts of us. And so when I was in the ice bath, I was like sitting in it, breathing through it, and sitting in the discomfort for long enough to get through to I started to relax into it, and it got a little bit easier. And then I forgot, and then it got cold again, and then I had to start and breathe again, and then I forgot, and then it got cold again. And I just slowly, there was this repetition happening where I relaxed, and then I laughed a bit, and then I enjoyed it, and then it got hard, and then this fantasy that we have, or this idea that it should be easy, is exactly that. It's a fantasy. And this is the thing that gets us stuck with our health, with our any type of goal that we're trying to create. When we are trying to overcome something or move through, or deal with something, whether it be like social anxiety or anxiety and depression, or certain habits that we've developed that we're trying to change, and when we go back to them, or when we feel the judgment comes in, we then feel like we're not making progress. But the fear that comes up is very normal, and it's a normal emotion, and it's part of the process. When you do something new, when you go and learn something new, the fear part wants to keep you safe. That's its main role. And so the part of the process is learning to acknowledge all of these emotions and actually sit in them and not be scared of them. And we as human beings will run away from the uncomfortable feelings. And doing something that I have experienced, like sitting in discomfort, which I was still running away from, because the week before, the group, we all were doing 1 minute cold bath, hot shower. And then we had a bit of a pep talk from someone, and then we all went to 4 minutes. And there was a big leap that happened, and it was around our mindset with how we actually looked at it, and our relationship with pain and discomfort. And so then last night, it was freezing cold, it was windy, the conditions were much worse than last week, and it was more challenging. And so it was starting at day one. And so if you are watching this and you're struggling with anxiety or depression, or you're judging the shit out of yourself, or you're experiencing a lot of fear, or the self-critic, the inner self-critic is like running the show, just remember that when you look at other people who look like they have it all together, it's just that they have this different relationship with the inner dialogue and with themselves. And they're actually people who really are accepting and connected to themselves, which is the place we all want to get to, is because they're learning to love all the parts of themselves, even the dark parts, even the shadow, right? And so this is like this is what I've started using, because this is our relationship with fear. And so when we're in that space of fear and the inner dialogue, we contract. And if we actually go inward and connect to ourselves and give ourselves what we need, we then have the capacity to expand and we become more resilient and deal with what is in front of us. And that's the same as when I was in the ice bath. It was like, as I breathed into it and actually sat through it, my capacity to deal with the discomfort and the coldness expanded, and I could sit in it rather than, oh, this is really uncomfortable, get the hell out, only last a minute, which is what we did the first time, right? And it was still good to do for a minute, still challenging. But when you start to get to like 3 or 4 minutes, there's something that happens. And so this is a really good analogy. But what I see a lot of people do is they judge themselves for having those fears in the first place. And we've got to understand that these fears are just as much part of us. The critic, the shadow, the dark parts, the parts that beat the crap out of ourselves, the parts that judge other people, or the parts that have a darker side are just as much important, and they're just as much part of us as the light, as all the giving, joyful, connected parts of us. And if we don't acknowledge them, they will then go and find a way to be expressed in an unhealthy construct. And whether that sometimes be through drugs, through alcohol, through sex, through arguments in relationships, through picking fights, like there's many different ways that we will find ways as human beings to express those parts, because they're not being acknowledged, right? And so it's like then when we actually acknowledge them, our capacity to expand and deal with things like I was in the ice bath, we become more resilient. And so how do you do that? How do you learn to love all those parts? And a lot of this is what I do when I'm working with people, because we're working on health and food and wellness and blocking through. And a lot of that is our own conversation, the way that we view ourselves, our relationship with food, with our bodies, with with the habits that we're doing comes back to the relationship we have with ourselves. And we've got to learn to keep showing up and doing the processes again and again and again to get to success, to be successful in whatever area that you're looking at, whether that be a health goal, whether that be a business goal, a finance goal, whatever. It actually is just doing the same things again and again and again and again. And a lot of them are small actions, they're not big actions, but it's the repetition, the discipline that creates the freedom. And so we've got to learn that there's no secret sauce for a lot of the time, but it's remembering that we are humble in every moment, remembering our humanness and not making ourselves wrong. And so how do I do that? How do I actually get to those parts? So first of all, you've got to get into the body, because a lot of the time when we are in that stress response, in fight or flight, we go from the body up into the head, and that's when the chatter starts. And we've got to learn processes to get into the body. And one of my intentions lately, more so than any other time in the last few months particularly, has really been, how can I really become more embodied? What can I bring into my day to become more embodied so I can feel? And ice bathing is one of those things that I've brought into my world. Well, I got brought into its world because it brings me into my body, gets me into my body, gets me into that moment, into that breath, right? So we've got to do things to get into the body. The breath is one of the best ways to do this. You know, like some big, deep sigh breaths, like there's lots of different ways, but to me, that's the best one. Breathing in, letting it out with a big sigh, right? And then the next part is coming really present to the fears and the stories, acknowledging them and not making them wrong. And then connecting to those parts. And this is where, you know, what I use is reparenting or shadow work, where we connect to those parts and actually learn how to acknowledge them, how to see them, how to love them. And this is where guidance is really critical, because we all have blind spots that we can't see because we're in our own little container. And to have someone to guide you through that process, to go, yeah, this is where you need to go, this is where it's coming up, to navigate through that. And it always comes back to something that is a part of us that's not seen or heard, and usually from a younger version of ourselves. Could be an adult version, could be a child version. There's many different versions, but then connecting to that and giving that part what it needs. And that is a lot of what I do with my coaching now, because I just find it so powerful. But having that accountability and that guidance is critical, because we all have blind spots. But I just want you to know, if you're watching this and you've got stuff coming up, or you're dealing with anxiety and depression and, you know, all the inner critic, which we all have, no one doesn't have it. But it's like, instead of going, how can I get rid of it? It shouldn't be here. It's like, we've got to change the relationship with those parts of us. And as soon as we acknowledge them, as soon as we learn how to love them, they feel seen and heard. They're like a misbehaved child, like a kid throwing a tantrum, essentially. That's exactly what's happening. And as soon as they sort of relax and they feel more safe and secure, and there's the whole thing changes. And so this story that we've got to like remove those voices, and they shouldn't be there, actually stops us in our progress. Yeah. So I hope you found that helpful. I just wanted to share that with you. And, you know, like doing things that are going to get you embodied into your body, and breathing is the first step to that, because it gets you present and gets you into your body. If you've got any questions about that, let me know. I just wanted to share that story and those insights. And I felt like I was on a bit of a flow with it, like on a bit of a roll. And it's really powerful when you start to do this work on yourself, because a lot of the time what I see is people going, I just need to lose the weight, I just need to do it. And it's like, that's a byproduct, that's a symptom. and the body is out of balance, and it's our nervous system that is in alarm. And there's parts of us that are reacting and doing, I just need to change these habits. If I just get there, okay, all of that. If I get there, then those things will stop. We're running away from something. We're running away from the uncomfortable feelings. Can we relax like the ice path into the discomfort and learn how to sit in that? And then on the other side, you get out and there is a beautiful warm shower on the other side. And there's a beautiful, but you've got to go through it. And there's this endorphin rush that happens afterwards. Yeah, there's this good feeling, like accepting, knowing, being in your body that happens. And so it's the best analogy for me at the moment because I'm living and experiencing it. But it just represents so much for how we live our lives, our relationship with discomfort, the relationship we have with fear and the inner critic. Yeah, that is all. I hope you found that helpful. And I hope you have a beautiful day.